explore ideas and innovations shaping a more sustainable future. Today's episode looks beyond technology into how storytelling and human connection can drive climate action. Joining us is Ishan Shanavas, founder of Ecoinspire and author of The Wild Things. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Pleasure is all us, and we are more curious to know about you, Ishan. If you can introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure, my name is Ishan. I'm 22 years old. I'll turn 23 next month. I
Oh, congrats! Happy
this is
birthday.
thank you, thank you. I'm the author of The Lighter Wilder Things. It's a book that talks about my life searching for wildlife as a teenager because this is something that I'm particularly passionate about. And I'm the founder of Ecoinspire. It's an environmental education venture where I go to schools and colleges and corporates and talk to them about nature and wildlife. It's a venture I started last year, just after graduating, and so far we've reached 28,000 people across India.
That's a splendid journey, and it's a quite impactful number, right? To reach 28,000 is not a small thing to reach in 1 year. And I feel like I have to congratulate, and you also must feel really happy about the journey on how you were able to make an impact or influence, let's say, with such big numbers. And also, Ishan, my birthday is also in April, so yeah, April babies, yes. My question to you would be, what was the moment or what was the turning point in your life which led you to build Eco Inspire, and what were the problems you were trying to solve?
So I can't trace it back to one particular moment, but I did see a trend. So I happened to publish this book maybe 2 months before I had to graduate, 2, 3 months. And I was shocked by the response it got. You know, when you write a book, you think that that you'd be happy if 10 people read it. At least that's what I was feeling. And so
Mm-hmm.
when it hit the bestseller list that night, I was pretty shocked. I thought, okay, this is, we're really onto something. And the graph just kept going upwards. And so I realized that I had a unique opportunity here to ride this wave. Now, the ethos of the book was to inspire people to care for nature and wildlife because that is something that I'm passionate about. That's one of my main passions. And so I thought that the next logical step would be to take that message to people so that they would hear it straight from my mouth. And so right after graduating, I remember I think this was just a week or two after, I got some speaking opportunities like that came inbound. People asked me to speak and they'd seen my work, and I realized that there is a demand for something like this. There is a need of the hour. This is like there's a need of the hour to take this mission to people, and there are people who actually want to have speakers talk about this. And so it was this very unique cocktail where all these things came together, and therefore I decided to like brand the entire venture and create something solid instead of just me doing random speaking gigs. Do it under this banner that I named Eco Inspire, which is quite fitting because the name is to inspire people to care about
People. Yeah.
in the environment. And so I remember my first gig was sixth graders. I had a bunch of 16 or 14 sixth graders around me, and then I
Yeah.
built that. And so, and then I scaled it first regionally around Bangalore, where I'm from, and then I took it national.
No, that's great. And I'm surprised by the fact that you never actually planned to, let's say, go into this direction. But the turnout of the events helped you, understand better and also the impact which it was creating. And also, I'm happy that you had the sixth graders who were able to give you this first, let's say, experience of talking about climate or about environmental betterness in a broader umbrella, I would say. And Ishan, if you can elaborate more on this, because since you were still in college, what made you write this book in the first place?
So let's trace this back 7 years. Let's trace this. Let's go 7 years back into the past. I have been
Yeah.
involved in this space informally quite a bit. I've been a part of a lot of these different projects as a volunteer, as an intern. And so I had this unique perspective of a teenager, a youngster trying to contribute in whatever way possible. And I found that this was a unique perspective because as someone in this space, I read a lot, right? Of course, as an author, you better read. You can't
Yeah.
write without reading. And a
Yeah.
lot of the books that I read within the space were written by veteran ecologists, people with 40 or 50 years of experience. Now, I'm not an ecologist, I'm not a professional in this space, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not 40, 50 years old. I don't have that much experience. But what I do have is a unique perspective, because a lot of these people approach this with a very scientific mentality, with a very different mentality. And so, realizing that there was this unique space, I thought that um, I could create something that would contribute, that would at least shine a different light on the nature, on the natural world. And so I went about writing this book. Actually, this was like, these were the vague thoughts in my head, and my dad sort of condensed it for me, and told me that maybe you should write a book. And I thought that was brilliant. And then, of course, we got publisher involved, so on and so forth. And over 2.5 years, while I was studying and while I was working part time, also, I stayed up at night to 1 o'clock, just typing away on the laptop that I'm speaking to you, that I'm
Right
using to
now.
speak to you. Yeah, and so it was this realization that I had a unique story and a unique perspective to share, and it was also the realization that by doing this I could contribute to this conversation, and I'm happy that I can. I'm happy
And
that I
I'm glad
succeeded.
that you did. I'm glad that you
Thank you.
did actually, because starting is, let's say you had an idea, but also spending 2.5 years of solid research or your understanding and building perspectives. And I also would like to mention one point, Ishan, here. You were mentioning about the ecologists or the books which you read, right? Since I'm from the research space, even when I read any, let's say, wildlife conservation or climate change, how the global warming is changing, it is always the scientists who talk and bring out the data, because if we can't quantify something, you cannot change it, right? But also I agree on your point, because what you require is also a fresh perspective like yours. Because when you see from the other end, from a scientist where he's talking about what is happening or what are all the emissions, or this is ghg, this is the, the parameters which are reducing or increasing, this is more in terms of understanding it from a scientific logical rationale. At human level, this is my personal opinion, again I feel we need more natural connection to make changes, or to bring changes, or to sustain changes. Let's say in that way, sustaining things will require a human connection touch. So that's where it is more or less important for us to understand and bring more and more fresh perspectives on how we address this.
No, I
And
totally
if
agree.
pos
I totally agree. I just want to add to that. I think adding a narrative touch is the need of the hour. I think we have
Yes.
enough data that tells us, okay, the climate is suffering. The climate crisis is real. What we do need is a more humane angle to this, so that people actually connect to the cause. And I am happy to contribute to it.
Yeah, when you connect, you relate, and when you relate, you act on it. Yeah,
Well said.
thanks. And Ishan, if you can share a small snippet or small story or narrative from the light of wilder things to the person listening now,
Let's
so
see.
that they can go
Yeah.
and pick up that book to read,
Yeah, sure. No, no. I look. I get this question a lot. And it's always interesting to try and decide which story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to choose one that I often choose, and it actually angers a lot of people that I say, but I'm gonna say it anyways. So
Let's see. Yeah.
yeah. So I was in a place called Agumbe, which is a forested region in Karnataka, and to say it's a forested region is a bit of an understatement. It is heavily forested. It is the
Yeah,
I
Western
think
Ghats section.
Yeah, in the
Yes.
Western Ghats. Yeah, it's perhaps I think it is the rainiest region in South India, or somewhere there. And because of all this rain and this lush habitat that it has, it is the king cobra capital of the world. I'm pretty sure you can say that. It's it the species found in South India, of South India, and also in other parts. Ophiophagus kalinga is it's found, like, that's the hotspot for this particular snake. And so I'd gone there to help in one of these projects, and I was at this research station when I had woken up in the morning, and I'd heard this call of a leopard. All right. So leopards make this sawing call, which is a little hard to imitate, of course, but it sounds like someone sawing a tree, or someone sawing through wood. It sounds exactly like that. And I was quite intrigued. And so I got out of my tent and I went inside the surrounding forest to search for this animal, because that's the kind of person that I am. If I hear, especially something like a leopard, of course I want to see it. Damn it, it's a leopard. It's not a
I'm
Like I,
surprised
yeah,
because you were
yeah.
not scared, but rather,
Uh,
curious or interested to know what
yeah,
it was.
I'm not scared. I mean, I'm respectful. By the way, I respect. I've had some pretty close calls with a lot of wildlife, and I'm respectful, but I not. I mean, scared. There's a fine line. Anyways, so I had gone inside the forest, and I was trying to search for this animal, and just soaking in the morning. When to my left, I heard this deafening sound. Suddenly, something massive was charging through the forest. And to find out what happens next, you will have to
Okay.
read the book. And so that's
Oh my
that's
God. You had me there. I was actually leaning in, I was thinking about imagining already. So I think I don't know about the person listening. I would definitely pick this book up because I am a vivid reader. I read a lot in terms of understanding climate from scientific point of view, and also this is a part of my profession where I read quite a lot of journals on this. But again, I do pick up certain narrative books, right? The Climate Solutions from Nidula Ramesh. She also writes a very good narrative in particularly for India and what climate change means to us. So like that, I would like to get some new fresh perspective on this space, right? I would definitely take it, and you had me hooked on to the story. Now I want to know what happened, Ishan.
it.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So yeah, one more thing is that whenever you have such ideas, I also want to appreciate your father, because instead of brushing it off saying that first focus on the graduation, maybe then you can sit and pursue this, I want to actually thank your father for uh, encouraging you and also helping you find out the way to navigate all of this process of publishing. So yeah.
Both of them, both my parents, yeah, they've been
Yeah,
quite
I
supportive.
mean,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, yeah. Thankful to them that they supported you, and now we are talking today on that. So, Ishan, do you think the biggest climate change challenge today is awareness or lack of emotional connection?
I don't know if it is the biggest, but within those two choices, I would say the lack of an emotional connection is a problem that perhaps needs a little more attention than it's getting right now. I think there's a lot of research that points to the fact that our climate is not okay, but we aren't seeing enough people working to get the general public invested in this. And so I'm happy to say that I'm one of those people, and this is not even something I'm doing professionally. I just because I care about the cause. uh, I think we need more people to working to get others emotionally invested uh, in what is happening to our environment. And when we say climate and the environmental crisis, it sounds quite big, and so I like to boil it down. Wildlife, I think, is a great space because there is
Yeah,
something inherently interesting about animals and about creatures that don't really think like us, or creatures that see the world in a different way. And so that's one avenue through which I'm trying to get people interested in the broader environment, talking about the fact that there are these cool birds found right outside their front door, or there are these
yeah.
cool creatures that still exist right now as we're speaking on this call. There are
Mm-hmm.
blue whales perhaps 4,000 kilometers to my right inside the so to my right would be the Bay of Bengal. So there are all these creatures that are still there, and it's such a gift that we share this planet with them, and it would be a tragedy if that was no longer the case.
Yeah. I, concur with you on this because let alone these wild creatures, right? Like even small things, like let's say the small birds, which is there across trees in front of your house, in your backyard, or wherever you are seeing. What is also the tragic part about is like we don't have enough knowledge that we can even name few birds apart from the majority like sparrow, kingfisher, woodpecker. Apart from all of this, there are so many varieties and types of species, but including myself, I'm not saying this to any others or few others. Let's start from me. Even as a person who is so interested in this space, I can barely name, let's say, 20 types of birds in one go, but I can name so many brands, right? So it is such a state we are in that we don't appreciate which is fantastic around us, with us, in between us, and also everywhere where we are sharing this wonderful planet with them.
You know what's
You
good
rightly
though?
said.
Yeah, but what something positive that I'd like to add is that it has never been easier to learn about all these creatures. The internet is right now full of so many. Of course, I mean, there's work to be done to make it easier still. But compared to say when my grandfather was young, the amount of resources that we have at our disposal to learn about the natural world has never been greater. And I think people should utilize that.
Yeah, definitely. I think I
Not
also
not that I
take
think
this.
people should utilize that more. I think that is, I don't like that attitude of thinking that the world needs to be a certain way. Like I we need to work to make that the case. And so uh, one thing that I'm trying to do is get people to do this. I think that's a better way of
Hmm.
looking at it.
Yeah. And Ishan, if we look at storytelling, right, how does this act as a tool for climate action, not just as awareness?
Well, I think it's that is just the next logical step, right? It's you get people invested through story. Like for example, I could tell you about my book, how how it talks about this, that, and so on. But instead I just decided to tell you a story, and that got
Hmm.
you emotionally invested, right? And so now, okay, you are already baptized, so to speak. You already care about the cause. But if I were to
Yeah.
and this is something that I do when I speak to these students who are on the fence, and when I tell them the story, and then when I say, okay, you know what, to find out what's next, read the book, read more books, and learn, that gets them emotionally invested. And I can tell you that I've gotten numerous messages afterwards from their parents saying, okay, now my son, let's call him Atharv, like give me an
Hmm.
example, is so interested in birds. Where do we go? And then I give them a list of places that they can go around Bangalore. So
Hmm.
this is something that you kindle via
Hmm.
storytelling. That is storytelling, and developing an emotional connection to the environment is how you kindle an interest that will eventually flower into them contributing to climate action.
Yeah, and nicely put and lucidly explained. Why? Because unless they have their own interest, or if you are spiking that curiosity among young children when they are still budding and growing, so the interest which will they develop at this stage will help them build, let's say, when they're growing up, and also that will help them be more connected, which is more required for the climate action. Yeah, totally agree on that. So, Ishan, can you also tell the story of, like, I do agree now that we already know how and why you started Ecoinspire, how the journey has been, how was the past year for you?
Oh, it's been a whirlwind. I was having this conversation recently with my mom, actually, just reflecting on what this entire process was like. So I actually just passed the 1 year anniversary of my book. Right now, we're recording this on 26th March. I think it was
Hmm.
21st or 22nd when um, that was
Okay,
yeah. Thank you
congratulations.
so much. Thank you so much. And or it was around there basically. Right now, March. That's I remember, or April, March. One of them.
No
You get the
problem.
point.
We'll
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
fix it at March. Yeah.
Yeah, you get the point. No, so I and then of course Ecoinspire started soon after, and I'll divide this into two parts. I think one is the impact that I had, and one is the personal impact that this has had on me. I can honestly say that I have changed a few minds, and the
Hmm.
beautiful thing about us humans is that we can change our minds. I think that's one of the beautiful things about us as a species. And so I've gotten a lot of people, and I say kids, but I'm saying people, even college students, even people who are older, some folks who are like in their 70s or 80s, to think about the environment in a new way. I remember this one occasion. I was talking to a tree walking group in Trivandrum, Kerala. All right, so this was not a school. This was just a group of enthusiasts who like trees, and some of them are in their 50s and 60s, and of course they are slightly baptized in the sense that they care about nature. But they emerged from that talk with this new light in their eyes. They were so energized, and a lot of them told me afterwards that they felt this renewed sense of hope for the environment. And that's such an honor. Think about it. Like, I'm an
Yeah,
older person
definitely.
told me that I had an impact on how they thought. An old person who is, arguably set in how they think,
Who
has
has seen
changed.
more
Yeah,
of life already. Yeah.
like many times over. Like maybe in in multiples of my lifetime. That's how much experience they have, and still
Yeah.
they were able to. I mean, they were inspired, and that was really humbling. So that was one thing. I mean, I've had so many children, of course, look at the environment in a different way, and now try and take active steps to help save it. So if you told me 2 years ago that I'd speak to 28,000 people and
Hmm.
and change
Yeah.
some of their minds, I would be shocked. But I'm glad that I can say that yes, I've made a difference. Now, of course, it's nowhere near the total impact I want to have in my life, but it's a start. I can say
I
that I
mean,
changed
I
someone's. Yeah,
also you should give that
yeah,
credit, right? Since you are on the journey, it's never completely possible to reach the destination. It's always the journey which matters. So
exactly. No,
you should get that credit. Yeah.
totally, totally. It's just that final. Like I think anyone interested in this space feels a certain guilt, where they think that they aren't doing enough, and
Trust me.
yeah, you
Trust
probably
me.
you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying, right?
I
Yeah.
know. I know. Yeah.
And this was something I was facing at least for the last 6 7 years when I used to volunteer for these projects. But now I can say that okay, at least something I have done. I can look back, and when in the future when my children ask me what were you doing at that time, at least I'll have an answer. Like I did, I traveled, I decided to build a venture around this, and I traveled across the country to the fanciest cities and venues to the most rural of tribal schools to spread this message. It's I really pushed myself, and I think that speaks to the personal impact that this has had on me. I Of course, one is this ability to speak to a crowd. I was a reasonably good public speaker, but now I can go on stage with no fear. It's just I've just beaten that out of my system because I've had to do it so many times.
So many times.
Yeah, like I mean, at one point I had to speak to an audience of 2,000 people, and that was easy. I just went up and I spoke, and
Must be exciting one.
yeah, I mean, it was, yeah, that's what. So it shifted from being something that would give me some anxiety to now being something that gave me the thrills. It energized me, and I can honestly say that I can speak on any stage anywhere, even an interview like this. It is something that just comes very easily to me because I've put in the reps. Another thing
Yeah.
is another thing that I would honestly say has changed the way I think is the whole entrepreneurial nature of course, in building a venture. That is the muscle that you exercise, right? I I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneurially inclined person. This is what I care about. I just love building stuff. I think of the book as a product that I built. I refined it and I refined it, and I got I worked with an editor, so I worked with an external person. I got feedback. I tested, actually, like how you have an MVP, you test an MVP to see
Yeah.
how. So I remember in the beginning stages, I wrote some sample chapters, and then I got 60 people online. I'm part of this writing community based in Texas, but it's like a global writing community. And I got 60 of them along with some friends and family to edit that. So I sent them the Google Doc link. I allowed them to comment, and I said, "Forget I'm your friend right now. This is some raw material I have for my book. I want you to slice it up. Tell me what you
Be a
like. Tell
good
me,
critic.
yeah, no, be a great critic or be a bad critic, however you want to put it. Like I want you to slice it up and give me as much feedback as possible, so I can see what
Raw.
stories work, what don't." And I mean, I can the amount of red that was in my Google Doc afterwards gave me a lot of uh, material to work with,
Hope.
so that I could, yeah, no, more than hope, it just gave me material to work with, so I could tweak my story, so that I could edit my story accordingly.
Better
Yeah, and I mean,
narrative.
that's why the book. Look, I wrote a fabulous book. I can say that with full confidence, simply because I had all this feedback and I had the fantastic editor and so on, and that's why the book has done as well as it has. So so going through, it's one thing to uh, study entrepreneurship, which is what I did. I have a degree in entrepreneurship, but it's another thing to actually put in the reps and build something. So I remember I told you that story of the 16 sixth graders.
Mm-hmm.
That was me building the MVP for Ecoinspire. So that was my first session. I uh, i built a slide deck, and then I did this presentation. It went pretty well. It actually blew my mind because of how well it did. But there were obviously, like, I have a pretty high standard for the people who work with me, for the work that I do for myself. And so I remember seeing a few slides where I thought, okay, what, this didn't elicit that strong a reaction. And so for my next gig, I removed that, and okay, I got a better response overall. And then I still saw that there was some wrinkles to be ironed out, and so I fixed that. And then I did my next thing, basically building an MVP and then refining it, or building the
Yeah.
plane as you fly it. And so that has arguably been the biggest impact that I have seen in just the way I think. I am so committed to this entrepreneurial mindset, and so now as I go forward, having an entrepreneurial angle to my life is is a given. I'm just so sure of it simply because that is just how I think.
That's good because since you have it in your DNA, it helps you look at, let's say, the day to day activities and also understand and grasp what is required for you and how well you can tweak that and make it better every day because you grow every day, each day gets better. That's all. Right. And what is also striking me is that you said you have a degree in entrepreneurial. I would like to know more about Ishan. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, I that is perhaps the most transformative thing I have ever studied. Period.
Oh,
I did a degree in entrepreneur. So I have a degree in environmental studies and in entrepreneurial leadership and strategy. That's the name, but it's about entrepreneurship. And I think my entrepreneurship degree has just changed the way I think. So I did this in the last year of my university, at university, and it's definitely that was the best year that I had at university because it gave me this new lens to look at the world. It gave me all these frameworks, all these ideas that I had been peripherally touching. This gave me a solid framework that consolidated all of it, and it is a different way of looking at the world. So an entrepreneur, and this is part of the next thing that I'm trying to build, one of the next things that I'm trying to build, this an entrepreneur looks at the world as problems that need to be solved with the intention to go build something. That is how an entrepreneur thinks. That is the basis of all entrepreneurial thinking.
yeah.
And so I went about studying all these different courses, a course in branding, a course in creativity and design thinking, a course in how to think like a lawyer, which is by far one of the best courses I've ever done, a course in social entrepreneurship and how I mean, I built a slightly socially inclined on venture, right? Something that
Yeah.
has a social angle. And then there were other courses that I sat in, and all these very high professional, like high ranking entrepreneurs in all these different fields that I got to interact with because I was part of what can be termed one of the best entrepreneurship departments in the country at Ashoka University. So I it has fundamentally changed how I think, and that degree in my story will be one of those pivotal moments.
Yeah, I think maybe for our question where we were talking about those turning moments, I think maybe this will be a right fit to go there
Yeah,
and
definitely one of
understanding
them.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And it is also important, right? Because you mentioned that you started with environmental studies and coming to the entrepreneurial journey. Because in this podcast, and that was the main reason why I started, Ishan. Maybe I can share a couple of things from my side. You said that you will feel that you have not done enough. That was the same feeling I was having during my master's in environmental engineering. So that's when I started this in first year of my master's, where I did it in collaboration with Spotify and Anchor. I started with one story because I was thinking that I know I'm reading about environmental stuff, I'm aware of the, let's say, the changes and also benefits or also the deterioration which is happening day by day. But then one strike main question which struck me was, then if you're reading and not doing anything about it, then what's the point, Pooja? Like, you are just like everyone else. You are not even solving 0.001% of the problem. That's what scared me the most, that how can I be, in a position where I'm not doing anything about it. Then when I started, and I wanted to tell the positive story of this, because we have already so many people who are interested, keen and dedicated in this field. So I wanted to share their story and show it to the people, that see, look, there are some people who are already doing. If I can connect somebody to them, or if I can inspire them to be one of them, or next one in this same field, I think that I will feel happy or satisfied that I was able to bring some changes, or give some perspectives to people to understand, and also maybe push them towards this, so that they can understand the criticality and the need of the hour. So when I started doing that, I started feeling much better than what I was feeling earlier. But again, that feeling never goes away, Ishan, that you are not doing enough. It always starts, there is one tab in your mind which is always running. And that is, I think, maybe we just have it, and we just have to understand and maybe bear with it for the time being. Yes, and coming back to this again, in the traditional climate education, we like, what do you think are the limitations?
Well, I think one of them is something that we've talked about: the lack of an emotional connection, or rather, the lack of people trying to develop that. No one
Mm-hmm.
is going to care about the environment if you just simply bombard them with facts and figures. There isn't any emotional hook that gets them uh, on board, right? You need some narrative, you need storytelling to be a part of it. Now I get invites to speak to educators and all these different professionals, where they ask the same question. Ishan, okay, clearly Ecoinspire has something going for it. uh, what are some methodologies we can adopt? And one thing that I say is, look, facts are great, facts are important. Science, I mean, I'm such a big advocate for science. I champion the scientific method. But that is just one side of the story, especially when it relates to getting the message out there. You need science that sort of is the scaffolding, but you need a certain way to package it and sell it to people, right? It's again, it boils down, and that's why I'm so passionate about entrepreneurial thinking. You need to learn how to sell this idea. It's marketing at the end of it, except we're trying to not market to line our pockets, or not only to line our pockets, but we're doing this to s- uh, you know uh, to get to save the planet. If to very simply put, we're trying to market a certain idea to get people to save the planet, and so that involves thinking about this through a whole new lens. And um, I'll just give you an example. I
Yeah.
know I know a lot of conservation organizations right now. They're good friends, and I look at their social media, and I'm not too happy with it. And so a lot of these folks, I've asked them. See, social media, I know a thing or two because I built an environmental platform on social media, right? My Instagram speaks to that. And I asked some of these folks in these organizations, hey, who's running a social media? And they say, oh, we have this intern running our social media. And I'm just thinking, that is so not the way you should be thinking about this. Get someone who has some sort of expertise in this space and some sort of real experience building a brand online to help, first talk about your organization, but also talk about the cause. It's not something that you throw to an intern. That is completely the wrong way to look at it. And so that speaks to this larger problem of people not thinking about the packaging, not thinking about storytelling enough. It's within the conservation, let's zoom out, within the climate action space. That is an angle that has not gotten the attention it deserves, and I think that needs to change.
Then how are you changing that in Eco Inspire?
No, so okay, so I'll speak to two things. One, on Instagram, I see a lot of polished videos. All right, polished videos meaning, like, I mean, the whole this space has some of the most skilled photographers with these incredibly cinematic shots. But that has a certain space on social media. But there is also an appetite to things that look a little more rustic, things that look a little more real, things that look a little more relatable. And so a lot of
Relatable
yeah,
is one factor. Yeah.
exactly, right. And so one of some of the videos that I film, most of the videos I film, are just filmed on my phone, where I give my phone to someone and I say, look, there's a plant over here. I know a thing or two about the plant. Just film it. And so he said, he or she opens the camera. I say my bit, and then I add one caption, and then I post it. Now, this is something that has very low production quality, so to speak,
Quality.
but it is relatable because everyone knows what a home video, what a phone video looks like, right? It's not. Uh,
You don't have the lighting, the
yeah, it's not
angles, the
something that's very
setup,
polished and
everything.
clean.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Got
And so
it.
that's why it cuts through a lot of the clutter that is out on social media, and connects with people in a way that, uh, I think, connects to a little more basal uh, part of who they are, as opposed to very, very fancy, very, very cinematic footage. Now, don't get me wrong, I love that. I love cinematic footage, like nature documentaries. There are some incredible nature documentaries out there with great footage, but this is one space that is quite neglected, and I think we can see. I would love to see within the next 5 years 100 more nature educators. Not more, as in, yeah, I would see another. I'd like to see 100 nature educators pop up on social media, making these simple, clean style content to engage the public and get them on board. That's one way we can emotionally connect with them. Another just
Yeah.
angle to that would be to get them to make content in regional languages. Look, I speak English, I can speak Hindi and Malayalam and so on, but that's not my preferred language. And so if we get people to make a similar style of content, but in, say, Telugu or in Assamese or in uh, Bhojpuri, like, this is something that will connect with people because that is such an underserved market. So again, I think we really need to look at this through an entrepreneurial lens. As for Eco Inspire, my presentation does not have, like, one thing that I hate is a lot of text on presentations. It's not something that if I personally have to design, I try to minimize that. Instead, I
Mm-hmm.
have a photograph. I put some of my photographs and I guide my audience through stories. And so, in fact, the story that I told you earlier about the book and the creature that was charging
Yeah.
at me, that was a story that that's a story that I use in Ecoinspire. And the goal is, instead of telling people facts outright, I can tell you that, uh, uh, leopards are the most camouflaged animal on the planet. But instead, if I work through a story and if I tangentially touch upon that fact, then it will register a lot better as opposed to me just telling you outright. People that don't want to be spoken down to, or rather don't want to have a barrage of information thrust upon them. They want, uh, it's funny, I think people want to be taught without explicitly being taught, if that makes sense. People want to,
Yeah, I mean, they
yeah.
don't want to listen to you saying that, you're dumb or you don't know this or
No,
you're
no, no.
not aware of
No,
it.
no. That's not what I'm saying. People don't want to explicitly learn certain facts. If they can learn it implicitly, then it registers a lot better. And so
I mean,
that's
without making them feel that,
obviously,
like
yeah,
bombarding
obviously,
with a lot
yeah,
of information, because there is a limit on how much you can assimilate and how much you can, let's say, take into your system and maybe even remember it. I don't think that will ever happen in this case scenario. But what matters is what you will still remember after, let's say, 1 week of they listening to talking to you is what story you said and what was the impact of that story on them. Was
yeah,
I feeling interested? Did I feel the curiosity? Or was I surprised by a fact which you said? Those feelings will remain with me. Maybe because what happens is over a time you tend to forget, and it's human nature, right? So you need something which helps them, let's say, more than remember, it helps them to take an action. Call to action should be there where they can do something with that rather just listen to endless facts and figures.
exactly.
Yeah. And through your work and the little wilder things, what shifts have you seen, like in how many people who can relate to nature?
What shifts? What do you mean by that?
Uh, like, let's say you already mentioned that you get a few texts that on how it changed, or they are looking for, like, let's say, for birds and few other things. So, in a broader angle, I wanted to know from you that what shifts have you generally observed in people?
I think people realize that this isn't as gated a community as they might initially imagine. Like, I know a lot of people who have the potential to be interested, but they see this space as something that's too hard to get into. Now, look, I am not a trained biologist or an ecologist. I don't work in this space. And yet I am still quite involved simply because I said, hey, you're doing this research project. I can volunteer. I have two hands. I have two legs. I can walk and help you with so and so. Like, and I have a camera. Like, by, uh, and they've taken me on board. And so that's something that people through the story have realized that, oh, you know what, I can also help. I mean, if Ishan can do it, I can jolly well
I
do
can
it.
do it.
Yeah. And that another thing another shift I've seen is, in the folks that my message has resonated with, I've seen them wake up on Sunday morning and go to the nearby wetland and look for birds, or go for a weekend trip to Bandipur. Okay, I don't know where you're from, by the way, but in South India.
I'm from Bangalore.
Oh, great. Yeah. So they go to Bandipur.
Yeah.
Okay, great. This makes it easier. They go to Bandipur, or they go to Chikmagalur, or they go to places nearby to explore. Or they go to DD Hills, Devra and Durga, and all these local
Yeah,
places
nearby.
to try and see, uh, just experience nature. Because hopefully, because through Ecoinspire and through the book, they realize that these things are a lot closer to home, and they don't need to go to the Amazon, or they don't need to go to the Serengeti. They can go,
Somewhere
just to um, a
right
place nearby.
across.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of behavioral changes, if that is a real innovation, how do we scale it across cities and small rural communities?
The only way, I mean, one thing I look, I was thinking a lot about scaling, and this is something with Ecoinspire. Look, if it's I think in entrepreneurship and so on, it's called key man risk. where if it's tied to one person, then it's not scalable. I have built this entire venture, and this was a big learning for me. But a lot of it, if not all of it, is predicated on my skill and me being
Yeah.
present. Instead, if I had a team of say 10 educators, then we're talking about a different story, right? Because then I can deploy people to different spaces and have them conduct, and of course, then the scale also
Will
increases,
increase immensely.
and the reach increases. And so that is something that I realized. We need to have a space where, I mean, if any nature based educate or any education based person is listening to this, I'd love to help you where I could uh, where we mentor and groom certain educators to then have them go and spread this message on the behalf of a certain organization. That's what I would love to see. I'm happy to tell you that there are some organizations working in this space to train people in how to conduct these
If possible,
sessions.
can you mention some of them so that
I
I
mean,
can also.
it's not exactly related, but the naturalist school train physically. I mean, they actually train naturalists, and
Mm-hmm.
what I would like to see is many more such organizations that do this, and they also train them in a certain medium of instruction. So, in a way, this is actually topic agnostic. This doesn't only confine itself to
Talk about
nature and
this.
wildlife. Yeah, it's. I
Yeah.
mean, it's you can be an expert in whatever field in astrophysics, but you need to learn how to communicate those ideas to an audience that is not at the same level as you are. I think people who are
Yeah.
so deep in this, and that's something that I've noticed, a lot of these very veteran ecologists and so on that I meet are such brilliant minds, but they're so brilliant that they can only speak in brilliant terms, and therefore a normal audience who isn't
Yeah.
as brilliant, they
They
can't.
cannot bridge that
Yeah, so they can't assimilate those brilliant
communication
ideas
gap.
simply because
Yeah.
they're speaking a different language altogether. And so that's
Altogether, yes.
that is something I would like to see. I think if we can work at that on that angle of this entire space, where we get people to where we train people to communicate in a certain way, I think we'll see a far greater impact. I That
Yeah.
is one shining message I've learned from Ecoinspire. I'm not a veteran ecologist, but I figured out a method. I figured out how to get these ideas across to people, and I'm very proud of it.
And you should be, because see, that is quite important. It doesn't matter whether you have whatever experience or knowledge. What is also important is like how simply you can explain it. Because let's say if you can explain your idea or a simple concept to a small kid who doesn't have any idea about that, then you are actually winning, because that's how you can judge how much understanding or the depth you have acquired over the subject or the concept. Otherwise, it becomes me talking Greek and Latin, saying like, "Hey, Ishan, this is what happened, or this is where the scientists are working, and this is how the IPCC is working, or getting the GWP numbers." Then you will feel like it's Greek and Latin. You will say, "Pooja, I'm really not getting at nowhere. I cannot figure out, or nor can I relate to your numbers." So this, even I feel, and I totally agree with you, this space needs lot of communicators and lot of educators where they understand this better and tell or spread the information in such a way where it is simple, easy to understand, and more relatable way. So that is one key. If we can crack it, I think, as you said, we will have, or I hope to see more and more, maybe influencers or Instagram content pages where they are frequently talking about this. Yeah. So, Ishan, now we are at the end of this session, and we have a very small rapid fire round. It will be fun, and you have to just give us one words without no explanations. Okay?
All right. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So, forest or ocean?
Forest. I love ocean.
Okay, I
I love
kind of
oceans
figured that
also.
already.
No, but I love
Yeah.
oceans also. I have to say it. Yeah, but okay.
But okay, tough choice. Yeah. So, a book that changed your perspective.
It's not a wildlife book. It's called the Personal MBA by Josh Kaufman.
Okay. Okay. And one habit that makes someone more climate conscious.
Consuming less.
Consuming less. I think I
No,
would like to
no. I would rephrase that. Sorry.
yeah.
Thinking about their own consumption. That is a habit.
Yes. Yeah.
Consuming less is a practice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because maybe I will spend a minute here because that is also very, like, triggering me to say something. Because the more you are conscious about what you are buying and where you are spending, because that is the power, if I'm spending my time, or if I'm spending my, let's say, money, that is the power I'm giving to that person. It is not just the voting power, we also have other powers. So please use it wisely, where you spend money, where you spend time. Even on Instagram, if I'm not watching so and so videos or the content, I cannot just blame about it, right? If I myself I'm not spending the time on the content, then how can I expect the content to be more and more? So that's how you actually have a lot of powers in your hand. Please use it wisely. One thing people get wrong about sustainability.
That they think that it's this grand change that they need to make to their lives. It's not. It starts with the little things.
Yes, little things. Last question. One word for climate innovation.
Entrepreneurship.
Cool. Thank you, Ishan. And we had such a fantastic time talking to you because it felt more like a conversation rather an interview here. And also, thanks for showing us that climate innovation is as much about people as it is about solutions, right? And this conversion also reminds us that changing how we think and feel about nature is where real impact begins. That's it for today's episode of Get Set Green. I'm your host, Pooja Arve. Thank you for tuning in to the conversations that matter. If this story inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it, subscribe, and join our community of change makers. Together, let's keep purpose meeting planet one week and one story at a time. Until next time, stay curious, stay foolish, and let's get set to get green.